Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something, you've probably felt it before. That quiet, frustrating moment when you look into a woman's eyes and sense that she's there physically but emotionally slipping away. No matter how much charm you muster or how authentic you think you are being. It's as if your words have weight but no gravity, floating in a space where she listens politely but doesn't feel pulled into you. That experience is so common it hurts, and that is why today we're stepping into something both provocative and quietly powerful, the darker side of psychology, how subtle psychological influence, when used responsibly, can nurture deep romantic desire. Yes, this video is about dark psychology tricks to make any woman love you. But before your mind rushes toward manipulation or deceit, let's clarify something. We're not here to trick women into false intimacy. We're here to understand how attraction, attachment, and desire work at a psychological level, and how you can embody that understanding with grace, confidence, and deep respect. For adults over 25, men who are beginning to realize that charisma isn't just about flashy pickup lines or external success, these insights matter deeply. Women of substance don't fall for shallow gestures. They respond to presence, emotional mastery, and psychological depth. So today's conversation will explore this from a grounded, mature perspective, blending timeless psychology with a modern relational mindset. Now imagine this: you're sitting across from her at dinner, and without raising your voice or forcing attention, she leans in. Because there's something quietly magnetic about you. You seem like a man who understands her without needing endless words. She feels emotionally safe, but also a little intrigued, a little uncertain, pulled by an undercurrent she can't explain. That's not sorcery, it's a learned mastery of presence and psychological subtlety. We're going to uncover how you can cultivate that effect. The first thing you need to understand is emotional mirroring, not imitation, but the ability to mirror back her emotional state subtly and elegantly. When you reflect her mood, not necessarily her opinions, but her emotional landscape, she begins to feel understood, in a way most men never offer her. It's not about parroting her words or agreeing blindly. It's about tuning into her rhythm. Is she speaking quickly? Match her tempo slightly. Is she leaning forward, speaking softly? Drop your own tone to meet her softness. Humans are wired to bond with those who seem to match them. When you mirror emotional energy carefully, you bypass her conscious mind and speak directly to her emotional nervous system. Here's where the dark psychology begins to shimmer quietly. You don't tell her you understand her. You allow her to feel understood without needing proof. She won't consciously realize you're doing it, but she'll feel unusually drawn to you, comfortable yet intrigued. Next, let's talk about controlled vulnerability, a psychological trick so subtle it feels almost invisible when used right. Many men misunderstand vulnerability, thinking it means confessing every insecurity or struggle too early, hoping for sympathy or closeness. But what truly draws women closer is calibrated vulnerability. You share just enough of your story or an emotional scar to reveal that you have depth, that you are human. But you do it with self-possession and a lightness that says, I carry my wounds, but they don't control me. Picture it. You mention, almost in passing, how a past relationship taught you to slow down and appreciate emotional presence. How you've learned not to rush connection but savor it. You don't spill your life struggles on the table. You reveal a glimpse, enough to suggest depth without drowning her in detail. And then you move on calmly, warmly. This makes her feel she's glimpsed something rare, and women instinctively desire men who seem to hold something rare. Women want a man who has edges mystery, but edges softened by warmth. Controlled vulnerability ensures that you appear strong, yet not rigid, human, yet not desperate, And while we're here, we can't ignore the allure of creating subtle psychological contrast. Think about it. Humans are drawn to polarity. When you combine warmth with unpredictability, when you're affectionate but not always available, you generate tension. And in romance, tension is fuel. The key is to balance availability and absence in a way that feels natural, not calculated. She texts, you respond warmly, but sometimes with brevity. You're engaged but never overeager. When you're together, you're fully present, but you leave her wanting more when you part. This is where so many men go wrong. They fear absence, so they compensate with constant presence, flooding her with attention. But a woman must experience a little uncertainty to feel desire. She must sense that while you're available, you're not desperate, that your world is rich and full even without her, and yet you generously invite her into it. All of this takes us deeper into what might seem like manipulation from the outside, but from within a mature, ethical relationship mindset, it's simply mastering emotional rhythm. It's learning to dance not only with her words, but with her nervous system, her emotions, her felt experience of you. And now that we're feeling into these rhythms, this emotional dance, you're beginning to understand how presence itself becomes seductive when wielded with subtlety. No games, no pushy tactics, just awareness. Women feel that deeply, more deeply than most men realize. There's something powerful about understanding that attraction isn't about perfection. It's about presence and the subtle dance between certainty and mystery. Now that you've begun to absorb the energy of emotional mirroring, controlled vulnerability, and calibrated contrast, it's time we go deeper into these darker, more nuanced psychological threads that quietly weave desire into a woman's heart. At the core of human connection lies anticipation. Our brain craves the feeling that something meaningful is just beyond the next moment. This is where the art of delayed gratification enters, and it's one of the most underestimated dark psychology tools you can wield. Most men rush toward closeness, offering themselves fully and too quickly, not realizing that pacing matters. When you master pacing, when you deliberately slow the tempo of emotional escalation, you amplify anticipation. You create space for her curiosity to grow, for her imagination to fill in the gaps with a story about you that is more compelling than anything you could verbally tell her. You say less, but each word carries more weight. Imagine the difference between a man who texts immediately after a date, summarizing every detail of his feelings and hopes, and the man who texts warmly but sparsely, allowing time to pass before reaching out again, always leaving a small gap for her to wonder where his mind is. The second man creates tension, and in romantic psychology, tension is the spark that keeps interest alive. You don't just give her certainty. You give her moments of mild uncertainty, enough to stir desire but never enough to feel manipulative. This naturally leads us to a fascinating psychological principle, controlling the frame. In every conversation and every interaction, there's an unspoken frame, a set of rules about who is leading and who is following. The man who consistently follows her conversational lead, who adjusts himself entirely to her moods and whims, may seem accommodating, but he silently communicates neediness. The man who gently but firmly holds the frame, who suggests the next move, who speaks with calm conviction, creates a sense of leadership that women instinctively trust and desire. But this isn't about domination or arrogance. It's about quiet confidence, choosing the restaurant not because you're controlling, but because you're decisive. Leaning back slightly in conversation not because you're aloof, but because you're grounded and self-assured. When you hold the frame, you signal that you are not chasing, you are inviting, you are not anxious for approval, you are extending presence. And that presence, when combined with unpredictability, is deeply magnetic. Women are sensitive to patterns. When you show up predictably at the same time, saying the same things, using the same words of affection, she may appreciate your reliability, but she won't necessarily feel excitement. To maintain emotional charge, you must break predictable patterns gently, playfully. If you normally text every morning, skip a morning, but when you do text later, send something that feels thoughtful, playful, unexpected. If you usually suggest quiet dinners, suggest something spontaneous instead, a walk under the stars, an unexpected detour in conversation that touches on something unusual or personal. This pattern breaking isn't random, it's intentional. You're inviting her nervous system to wake up, to stay engaged. And in a world where most men communicate mechanically, this makes you stand apart. You see, dark psychology is less about manipulation than it is about emotional awareness, precision, and timing. When you lean into these tools with integrity, you become the kind of man who doesn't have to beg for attention. You become the man whose attention itself feels like a gift because it's scarce, intentional, and deeply present when given. This brings us naturally to one of the most potent psychological strategies of all, scarcity itself. Humans value what is rare, and your presence, your emotional availability, should be rare but not distant. This means cultivating a full, vibrant life where your attention is genuinely valuable. You're not always online, always available, always ready to text back instantly. You respond when you choose to respond. You meet her gaze fully when you are present, but when you are away, your focus is elsewhere, your work, your passions, your personal growth. And she feels that distinction not because you say it, but because your way of being communicates it without words. She knows that you're not a man drifting through life waiting for her attention. You're a man moving with purpose, and your attention must be earned, not demanded. This principle alone changes everything. It's subtle. It's not about ghosting, disappearing, or playing cold games. It's about value. Your time is valuable, and therefore your affection feels valuable. And when affection feels valuable, desire follows naturally. You begin to see that what draws a woman in is never neediness or overexposure. It's careful, deliberate, warm engagement, punctuated by pauses that let her lean in, wonder, and imagine. You cultivate an emotional atmosphere where she can feel her own desire rising, not because you're forcing it, but because you're skillfully creating conditions where it naturally grows. And what's beautiful about this is that once you embody these ways of being, you never have to think about tactics again. It becomes the natural expression of a man who is stoic in his self-possession, calm in his emotional leadership, and warm in his rare moments of vulnerability. It's fascinating, isn't it, how much of what ignites desire is invisible, unspoken, deeply felt but rarely named. When you begin to embody this kind of emotional awareness, you realize attraction is less about words or even appearance, and far more about the emotional atmosphere you create around you, a kind of gravity that pulls her in almost without her knowing why. But there's another powerful thread we must weave into this conversation, and it's often misunderstood, the art of emotional withdrawal, not as a weapon, but as a psychological space that heightens her feelings toward you. This is where most men stumble, either withdrawing too dramatically and creating distance, or clinging too tightly and smothering connection. The key here is subtlety. Emotional withdrawal means you understand that constant reassurance diminishes its value. You allow small moments of space in the connection, not because you're punishing her, but because you trust that distance can deepen longing. Think about how desire itself functions. It thrives in space, in absence, in the delicious ache of missing someone. So you learn when to lean in and when to gently pull back. In practice, this might look like giving her a beautiful evening together where you are fully present, and then allowing a day to pass with minimal contact, not to play games, but to allow her to reflect, to feel the absence of your presence, to invite her to lean toward you. Your calm comfort with that space quietly communicates strength and emotional maturity, which is irresistible to women who have grown tired of men who chase and crowd them. What this teaches her, without you ever saying a word, is that you're not desperate, not dependent, not emotionally needy. You're a man who enjoys connection but is not defined by it. And this message strikes a deep chord in women's psychology. Women want to feel chosen by a man who has other options, other priorities, but who selects them anyway. Now, let's explore another sophisticated layer, anchoring emotions. This is one of the most elegant dark psychology principles, and when done well, creates profound impact. Anchoring means you deliberately associate your presence with a particular emotional state in her experience. For example, if you become the person she shares laughter with consistently, if you are the man who introduces play, lightness, and joy in your interactions, her nervous system begins to link you with that feeling. Or if you can become the man who makes her feel safe when she's vulnerable, she begins to associate your presence with emotional sanctuary. The trick here isn't to overtly announce this, but to quietly cultivate an emotional environment where she consistently feels something positive when she's with you. This isn't manipulation. This is emotional leadership. You're guiding her experience toward warmth, safety, intrigue, or excitement, depending on how you want to frame the relationship. And once that association is established, desire follows almost effortlessly. Even the timing of when you create these emotional anchors matters. Shared laughter during moments of uncertainty, kindness when she's feeling self-critical, patience when she's frustrated. All of these plant seeds of emotional association that bloom over time. She may not consciously realize why she's thinking about you when she's stressed or lonely, but her body remembers how she felt in your presence. But none of this works without mastery of your own emotional state. And this brings us to perhaps the most essential principle, self-regulation as seduction. Women feel your energy before they hear your words. If you're anxious, needy, impatient, or insecure, it doesn't matter how attractive your outer presentation is, she will sense it and withdraw. If instead you are calm, grounded, and emotionally sovereign, meaning you take full responsibility for your emotions, you become magnetic. Imagine this. She pushes your buttons, tests your patience, or challenges your opinions not out of malice, but as a natural way of testing your center, your strength. And instead of reacting emotionally, you breathe. You respond with warmth, but without giving away your power. You listen carefully, but you don't bend your values to accommodate her moods. This is the stoic core that women respect, admire, and desire. You become the mountain not because you are cold or distant, but because you're steady, present, and trustworthy. This emotional consistency becomes a safe harbor in her often chaotic emotional world, and once she feels that safety, even if she tests it from time to time, she will return to it. You become her anchor, calm, steady, strong, and finally, let's touch on the emotional psychology of touch itself. Touch is language, but it's not just any touch, it's calibrated touch that speaks to her nervous system gently but firmly. The first touch matters deeply. The placement, the pressure, the timing. Is it light on her lower back as you guide her through a doorway? Is it the brief brush of your fingers against hers when you laugh together? These moments, when executed with intention and confidence, become touch points of desire. They communicate that you are a man who knows how to connect, not just with her mind or her words, but with her body and emotions at the same time. When you combine all of this calibrated emotional withdrawal, anchoring emotions, self-regulation, and intentional touch, you step fully into the realm of subtle but profound psychological influence. You stop chasing, persuading, or proving. You start inviting her into an emotional atmosphere she doesn't encounter with most men, a space where she feels safe, intrigued, challenged, and desired all at once. And here's the beautiful thing. These principles are timeless. They don't expire. They work for any age, but especially for men over 25 who are tired of transactional dating games and want something deeper, something more elegant, more fulfilling. You might already feel it stirring within you, that shift from viewing attraction as something external, something to be earned or won, to understanding that real attraction begins in the quiet confidence of how you move through the world. Women are attuned to this shift even before you speak a word. And that's why we now turn toward a concept that may seem paradoxical at first: strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity is a delicate dance that creates emotional intrigue without crossing into dishonesty. It's the art of allowing parts of yourself, your thoughts, your plans, and your feelings to remain gently veiled, not because you are holding in fear, but because you understand that mystery fuels desire. When you answer a question about your weekend plans, for instance, you do so warmly but without exhaustive detail. She asks where you went, and you smile, offering only the essentials but leaving the door open for her curiosity to wander. Not every detail needs to be revealed for a connection to deepen. In fact, too much detail too soon often dilutes tension. Ambiguity invites her imagination into the relationship, and when her imagination becomes engaged, desire follows. The mind is the ultimate seduction tool, and you're allowing her mind to participate, to fill in the blanks with her own longing. This is where dark psychology isn't dark in a sinister way, but dark in the sense of shadow, inviting her to explore the unknown, to sense the depth of you that remains beautifully concealed. But this isn't about being cryptic or evasive. It's about understanding that openness is most powerful when balanced with just the right amount of restraint. Women are attracted to men whose lives feel bigger than their conversations, whose presence suggests depths that can't be fully mapped in one evening. Strategic ambiguity is what keeps her leaning in, keeps her curiosity alive, and curiosity is one of the engines of love itself. This naturally blends into another deeply effective psychological principle: storytelling as seduction. When you speak, the frame you offer matters far more than the facts you share. A man who recounts his day in flat, factual terms rarely inspires much interest. But a man who knows how to frame his experiences as little stories, infusing them with mood, tone, subtle emotion, draws a woman in effortlessly. It could be as simple as describing how the barrister smiled knowingly as you ordered something unusual that day, or the strange little detail you noticed on your way home, or the quiet moment you took to pause and reflect in a park, watching the way the wind moved through the trees. This kind of narrative presence signals to a woman that you are awake, not just mechanically moving through your life, but truly living it. And this matters profoundly, because women are drawn not just to men with achievements, but to men who can bring the texture of their experience alive. When you embody this kind of storytelling, your very presence feels like a conversation she wants to keep having, even in silence. You're signaling to her that life with you will be vivid, interesting, full of small but meaningful moments. And women over 25 in particular crave this, a life not necessarily filled with grand gestures, but filled with felt presence, subtle color, and emotional dimension. Now, let's not forget another crucial psychological nuance that most men overlook: mirroring not just emotion but language. When you listen deeply, you begin to notice how she phrases things, what metaphors she naturally uses, what words she chooses to describe herself and her world. When you reflect those words back in conversation, not in an obvious way, but as part of your natural speech, you send a powerful signal: I understand you. I see you. I am attuned to your way of thinking. This linguistic mirroring builds rapport so quickly that most women won't even realize why they feel so connected. But they will feel it deeply, instinctively. You become the man who just gets her, and this connection bypasses surface attraction and moves straight into emotional intimacy. At this stage, we must speak about eye contact, the most potent nonverbal psychological tool of all. The way you hold a woman's gaze can create a vortex of intimacy almost instantly if you do it with presence. But here's the nuance most men miss. Effective eye contact isn't about staring or intensity. It's about relaxed, grounded contact, a gaze that holds but never grasps, a gaze that sees but does not demand. When you master this, you create an atmosphere where she feels seen but not pressured. You invite her to reveal herself, not through interrogation but through comfort. Women are exquisitely sensitive to the difference between a gaze that seeks validation and a gaze that reflects inner peace. When your eye contact is relaxed, calm, warm, but firm, you become a man whose very look feels like a sanctuary. And there's one final subtlety to explore in this part of the journey, emotional pacing. Just as physical pacing matters, so too does the rhythm of your emotional availability. You don't rush to solve her problems the moment she voices them. You don't rush to offer reassurance every time she expresses doubt. Instead, you let there be space around her words. You allow pauses to breathe. You let her feel your emotional steadiness as she moves through her emotions. This teaches her body that you are safe, not just physically, but emotionally safe. And from this place of safety, true attraction flourishes. There's a moment in every connection when the quality of your energy becomes more important than your words. It's subtle but unmistakable. She starts feeling not just how you listen, but how you exist beside her. That's where true psychological influence lies, in the atmosphere you generate and the tension you hold without collapsing into neediness. This brings us naturally to an advanced but essential principle, congruence. Women over 25 in particular are extraordinarily attuned to incongruence. If your words say one thing but your body language whispers another, she will feel it. If you profess confidence but your micro-expressions betray insecurity, she may smile politely but internally pull away. The man who captivates her is the one whose energy, language, posture, and gaze all align effortlessly. Congruence doesn't require perfection, it requires integration. You don't have to be flawless, but you do need to embody a kind of coherence between what you feel and what you express. When your emotions, thoughts, and presence align, you exude an effortless authenticity that women trust and desire. They sense you're not performing for them. You're simply living from a place of grounded clarity. It's this grounded clarity that allows you to play with polarity, one of the most attractive forces in romantic psychology. Polarity is the dance of masculine and feminine energy, and even if you've never thought of yourself this way, when you embody masculine polarity with grace, you create the space for her feminine essence to bloom. This isn't about being rigid or macho. It's about cultivating a calm but powerful directionality in how you lead interactions. You suggest plans with confidence, but leave space for her input. You hold eye contact steadily, not aggressively. You listen deeply, but guide conversations with intention. You offer warmth but stay anchored in your own emotional sovereignty. And the more you radiate this integrated masculine energy, the more she feels drawn into the dynamic dance where she can relax into her feminine energy, because you're holding the container with strength and calm. This dance of polarity is subtle but powerful. If you soften too much into passive niceness, you collapse polarity. If you become domineering or inflexible, you create resistance. But when you strike the balance, strong, clear, yet warm, you offer her something that most modern men don't, a sanctuary where she can express, feel, soften, and be met by your steadiness. This is where humor becomes an unexpected tool of dark psychology, but not jokes for performance or self-deprecation. Humor, used wisely, lowers defenses, opens hearts, and builds emotional intimacy almost instantly. When you can weave lightness into your presence, not silly, performative humor, but wry observation, playful teasing that respects boundaries, You introduce levity into emotional connection. Women love a man who can laugh easily but not nervously, who can see the absurdity of life without cynicism, who can hold space for their emotions, and then, with perfect timing, lighten the atmosphere so that tension turns into intimacy. That timing is psychological mastery, knowing when to break the tension, when to hold silence, and when to offer a playful remark that brings a smile to her lips and warmth to her body. But remember, humor must always flow from presence, not performance. If you try too hard to be funny, it will feel off. But if you're grounded, observant, and relaxed, your humor becomes an expression of your emotional agility, and that agility is deeply seductive. Then there's your voice, an often overlooked but profound vehicle of influence. The tone, cadence, and rhythm of your voice can relax a woman or agitate her without her even realizing why. A stoic, confident voice is warm, measured, unhurried. You speak with pauses that allow your words to land. You don't rush, over-explain, or fill silences nervously. When you speak like this, her nervous system responds before her conscious mind can interpret your words. You become a calming presence, a man who doesn't rush because he trusts that everything important will unfold naturally. Your very voice becomes an anchor, something she will remember and feel even when you're not around. And what makes all this work, the humor, the polarity, the voice, the congruent, is that you are cultivating a way of being that most men neglect. You are choosing not to chase but to attract, not to persuade but to create an emotional atmosphere that women step in to willingly and joyfully. That's why we return again and again to this central principle, self-possession. The man who practices these psychological principles without grounding himself in self-possession will always drift into manipulation or insecurity. But when you root these principles in a calm, integrated sense of self, you invite a woman to experience something rare, a man who doesn't need her to complete him, but who offers a space where she can experience herself more fully in his presence. That is what dark psychology, when practiced ethically, can achieve, not manipulation but mastery. You're not bending her will or playing games. You're cultivating presence, pacing, emotional leadership, and psychological depth that draws her in naturally. And when you embody this, attraction stops being something you chase. It becomes something you generate from within. At this point in our journey together, you may already feel that shift happening inside you, a quiet but powerful recognition that this isn't about tricks, lines, or tactics. It's about creating a way of being that invites, holds, and deepens connection without ever begging for it. It's about becoming so grounded in your own presence that desire becomes effortless because women sense your emotional solidity before they hear a word you say. And now we reach one of the most subtle yet transformational psychological dynamics, the power of withdrawal at the peak of intimacy. Imagine this, just when emotional connection is flowing easily, when laughter and chemistry are present, when she feels your attention fully on her. You gently, calmly, and gracefully step back. You withdraw, not with coldness or indifference, but with warmth and a quiet sense of your own value. You say something simple but intentional. I've really enjoyed this evening, but I should head out. You leave not because you're rejecting her, but because you trust that holding back at the right moment amplifies longing. This is an ancient psychological truth. Humans crave what feels just out of reach, and attraction thrives on anticipation. This type of emotional withdrawal isn't a game. It's a display of self-mastery, timing, and pacing. You're showing that you can enjoy connection without clinging to it. You're demonstrating a confidence that says, I don't need to stretch this moment beyond what feels natural, and I trust there will be more. This confidence is intoxicating. Most men overextend their presence, thinking that more time equals deeper connection. But it's often the man who leaves her wanting just a little more, whose absence lingers in her mind, who becomes irresistible. And this dovetails with the final psychological dynamic we'll explore together, future pacing. Future pacing is the subtle art of planting seeds of possibility in her imagination, not overt promises or plans, but hints and glimpses of what could unfold if your connection deepens. This might sound like a casual, "I know a little place you'd love next time," or "that reminds me of something we should do together someday." These soft hints invite her to imagine herself with you in the future, which is a deeply bonding experience. And because it's casual and pressure-free, it doesn't feel manipulative. Instead, it feels playful, optimistic, and inviting. You're allowing her imagination to join you, not through force, but through gentle suggestion. Future pacing works because humans naturally move toward the things they can envision. When you offer her a glimpse of shared experience, you become woven into her inner landscape. She starts to imagine what life would feel like with you, not just in this moment, but in moments to come. And that is where deep emotional hooks take root. But it's essential to understand none of these psychological dynamics withdrawal at peak intimacy, future pacing, humor, polarity, emotional pacing will work sustainably unless you embody self-worth at your core. Your ability to influence attraction ethically depends entirely on your grounded sense of value. Women are not fooled by surface tactics. They are drawn to a man who respects himself, who honors his own time, who gives warmth freely but does not need validation to feel whole. When you become that man, when you stop seeing attraction as something to win or extract, you become effortlessly magnetic. Your very presence becomes an invitation, and women feel safe, intrigued, challenged, and desired all at once in your orbit. So the final and most important insight is this: you don't need to memorize tricks or scripts. You simply need to master your own emotional rhythm, lead with calm confidence, and communicate a quiet but unmistakable message. My presence is valuable, my time is precious, and while I am happy to offer both, I will never chase or beg. This kind of man does not persuade women to love him. He creates a space where love feels natural, easy, inevitable. And when you practice this, not as manipulation but as mastery, you move beyond the noisy world of transactional dating. You become a man of depth, presence, and elegance, a man who women remember, long for, and cherish not because you chased them, but because you invited them into an emotional atmosphere they didn't. No, they were craving.